Hello everyone, good evening. Sharing my screen. Okay, we'll go ahead and let me log into OIC instance first, guys. I'll go into UG63 project.
Hello, Prasad. Vishal here. Prasad,
Yes.
can you correct that recording, please? Because I was not able to progress forward for that integration, FBDI integration.
Yes, there is a problem with the recording, Prasad.
Okay, just give me one moment. Let me check it straight away.
Yeah.
It's not playable, is it? Or what's the problem? What's the exact
No,
problem?
it is a duplicate.
Actually,
one is
2
duplicate
days
and one is
before
not there.
Yes, one is 19 and 20. Between 19 and 20, there is one more recording which is not present. So actually 20 is 21.
Okay, this is a duplicate. I'm deleting this.
Yes.
These are the two sessions that we had, right? FPDA manual process. So I deleted one file, which was a duplicate because that file size was matching with this one. So I deleted that one.
And
So what
this
was
20
missing? 10th one is missing.
Yeah. And this 20 number is actually 21 number. And 20 number is missing. That is of 10th of January. No, not
No, on
10th.
11th.
Sure.
Okay.
12th of December one is missing, I believe.
Yes.
The last session that we did, right? That was missing.
No.
Last session was
11th, Thursday.
callback. Callback is there, and before that, when we started the actual integration,
Main service.
configuration
Friday.
FDB. Yeah.
That is not this one.
No, that is manual. So one day, Prasad, you started with a manual. Next day was a building, and third day was the execution. So execution is there and manual is there. In between, the building session is not there.
So 11th December, right? 11th December, so 115. 11th December is already done.
Yeah,
Even
this should be the recording.
January.
Yeah.
We'll just see if this is the one. Okay, this is same as 18th one, right?
Yeah, 18 is correct.
Well, these two are of same size.
Oh, okay. Yes, yeah, you're right.
No, don't go by the date. So sometimes what has happened, what's happening is I'm not uploading the video on that day. I've missed it on a couple of days, and next day morning I'm uploading it. So don't go by the dates. So this is fine. So okay. So for FPDA, we started off with, so we created AP invoice REST API here, and then what did we do after that?
We created the actual main service of FD.
Yeah, the main
Not
service.
main. You explained us how to do a manual FBDI upload.
Correct. That is this video, right? That is this video.
Correct. Yeah.
The very next day, we implemented the main service in OIC. That is on 11th of January.
Correct.
Okay, I was placing these files in there, but we didn't create a. Okay.
We did not create an integration. Yes, we started on 11th.
12th one is missing.
No, 12th is there.
12th is there.
12th is there. So in 12, we are actually calling how to call and
callback is
understand.
there. Service
Yeah,
callback is there.
Is there.
Is there.
Building.
Before
Building
that
is
one is
missing.
building is the one which is
Missing, yes.
Okay. So in between these two sessions, there was one more which was missing, right?
yes.
Yep, yes.
And when did you? Okay, let me do it this way. So this one we did on Friday, right? We did on Friday.
Yes.
Okay, and 11th we did the actual service build. So I need to upload the session recording of 11th, basically.
11. Yes.
Okay, I'll just check the size here.
I think you were picking the right.
It was 170 MB plus, and yeah, it was like full 1 hour session. So size wise looks right.
Or is it a coincidence
Oh
that
no,
both
it
of
is
them had
again
a
a
same size?
duplicate.
No, not a duplicate.
Okay.
It could just be that both of them might probably have a same size. Okay, I'll go in here. 6:30 to 7:30. 11 January. This is the one, right? That we need.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the
that's
one that we
correct.
needed. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So which means it is the right file. So this is a file that I uploaded here. And I need to rename this as 21. Just give me one moment, guys. Let me also do it in the backup drive as well. Put in the other drive. I will just add this one. Just give me one moment, guys. We'll get started. Okay, let's get started. Yes, I'm sharing my screen. So we created this FPDA callback and a main service and a callback service in our previous session. And when we did this, so why is it saying fail? I'm just going to say edit and recover. So let me go to ERP connection. I would update the connection details here. ET80. Not sure if somebody has logged the instance. Yeah, FinIMPL is not. So we'll just unlock this user and log in as FinIMPL now. Not really sure if somebody has logged the password of FinIMPL. I was not able to get in there. It's working now. I'm going to save this and I'll also open the SFTP server. Okay, so we have updated the connection details, ERP connection details, and I'll go ahead and activate these two integrations. And I'm also going to activate it. Okay. Now, when we created these two integrations, guys, especially the main service, we went ahead with certain assumption. Right? What was that assumption? First of all, when you get a file from a data source, so in this integration, you're getting a file from a data source, could be internal or external, and they would be giving us a file, a data file, and they would be placing in that file in a SFTP server. So when data source gives you a file, there are few possibilities in there. So a data source might give you property file or they might not give you property file. Okay, so those are the first two scenarios. And when it comes to data file, they might give you a data file in FPDA format, or they might not give you a data file in FPDA format. Okay, so it could be a .csv or XML or JSON file, but not in FPDA format. How do you deal with it? And when it comes to file size also, the file size can be less than 50 MB or it can be more than 50 MB. So you need to understand how to deal with these 4 possible scenarios. And that's what we're going to focus on in today's session. So when we created this integration, we went ahead with a certain assumption. I'll come to that in a moment. But whenever you build FPGA integrations, there are 4 possibilities that you deal with. The first one is, this is a best case scenario for you. Okay, you're going to get a file from a data source. And the file that you're going to get from a data source, the file that we get from a data source has, yes, we're getting a zip file from a data source. And that zip file has a CSV file in FPGA format, plus a property file. So so this is a best case scenario. Data is giving us everything. They're giving us first 2 files. We need 2 files, and data source is giving us both the files. And the data file also it is giving in FPGA formats. So if this is a scenario, and whenever you get into integration discussion for FPGA, guys, always push the client towards this scenario. So you simply tell them that, sorry, I cannot create property file. You have to create it and give it to us. Even though it is possible in OIC, you tell them that it is your responsibility. Because this is a best case scenario for us, and how exactly our integration is going to look like if this is a case. Yes, it's a scheduled orchestration. You list down the files, loop through them. And within the loop, what are you going to do, guys? Within the loop, you would download a file and you would directly send it to ERP cloud. So we don't need to do any transformations. We don't need to generate any property files additionally within the integration. So how is integration going to look like for this scenario? Let me just clone this integration, the main service. I'm going to call it as S1. And so first we would schedule orchestration, list on the files, loop through them, and we download the file. After we download the file, what do we need to do? We don't need to generate a property file, not really required. Because we're already getting a zip file, which has a CSV and a property file in it. And also when we download the file, right, we don't need to download it. We don't need to unzip it, basically. So you can just download it to a temporary location, download the zip file as is, and put it to a temporary location. Okay. And after you download the file to SFTP, we don't even need to zip it. So whatever is a zip file that I'm downloading here, and we also don't need to write the file to SFTP, because whatever file we are receiving from data source, we are just sending the file as is to ERP, right? So it's a scheduled orchestration. We are listing down the files, looping through them, and within the loop, 2 simple steps: download the files, send it to ERP. And when you go to the load mapper, you need to correct these 2 mappings. So earlier it was pointing to the stage file zip operation. Now I need to map it to the file that I'm downloading here. And save it. So this is how a plain and simple integration is going to look like. Okay, scheduled orchestration, list down the files, loop through them, download every file, or download the file and send it to ERP. So this is your scenario. So you don't need to do any transformations. You don't need to generate a property file. Now, what's the second scenario, guys? This time, so let's say you're doing it for you're getting a file from an external data source, and they say, Prasad, I can give you a .csv in FPGA format, but they say that they cannot give a property file. Remember, this is an assumption that we went ahead with, right? When we created this integration, that's a basic assumption that we have, that we used here. So when we have created this integration, what did we do? We went ahead and built integration with this assumption. So if a data source says they can only give you a CSV file in FPGA format, what is the first question that you need to ask yourself, guys? Do we always need property file, guys? First of all,
No.
when do we need it and when we don't need it?
When there is no parameter, we don't require it.
We don't need it, right? So when our data source says, Prasad, I can only give you a .csv file in FPDA format, and I cannot give you a property file. What's the first question that you need to ask yourself? Do we really need it or not? Okay. So even before you get into a discussion with data source, you check the import job, see if you have parameters. If you don't have parameters, don't ask them to pass in a property file itself. So we need to check if import job has parameters. Import and calculate daily rates job. Import and calculate daily rates job doesn't have parameters, right? So when import and calculate daily rates job doesn't have parameters, then what do we need to do? Even though you get a data file which only has a CSV file in it, the operations will still not change. So you would list down the files, loop through them, download the file, and you send it to ERP as is. So here we are sending only the zip file, the CSV file to ERP, but that is still okay because in ERP cloud, when the loader runs, the import job itself would be triggered automatically by the loader itself. And if the import job is created, if the import job has parameters, here it doesn't have parameters, but if the import job has parameters, what do you need to do? List files, loop through them, download file, write property file, right? So if import job has parameters, then what do we need to do? So if it has no parameters, it's exactly S1. And if it doesn't have parameters, it is S2. So this is the same integration that we created here. Even though GL daily rates doesn't require a properties file, I've just shown you how to generate one if it is required. So this exact logic that I have highlighted here is what you see in main service. This is our S2. Okay, what is it that we are doing in here? We were listing down the files, looping through them. Schedule orchestration, listing down the files, loop through them, download file, generate property file, and when we download it, we are unzipping it. So the data files sits in a directory path. Write a property file, zip them together. We need to write it to a SFTP location. And we also need to load it into ERP cloud. Okay, so this is a second scenario. So we are, if you look at scenario 1 and 2, we are only worried about the property file, right? So if we get it, fine. If we don't get it, we need to ask ourselves whether we really need it or not by checking import job parameters. If we don't need it, that's okay. Even though we are not getting property file, we'll still build the integration as S1. If we need it, then we'll build the integration as exactly what we have done in the session. Now for scenario 3 and 4, let's worry about the data file part. Okay, property file for scenario 3 and 4, assume that we need it, and also assume that we don't get it from a data source. So these bits are same. Okay, list down the files, loop through them. Okay, the initial section is fine, a download operation. Okay, and the remaining half is also same. Write property file, zip file, and send it to ERP. It's just that we need to have all these steps in scenario 3 and 4. Okay, we have the exact same steps. We're going ahead with an assumption that we need property file and a data source is not giving it. But there are 2 additional steps that we need to do here. So what's scenario 3? We would receive a zip file which is less than or equal to 50 MB in size. I'll come to the file size in a moment. So we are going to receive a zip file from a data source, and that zip file would have a data file in non-FPDA format. So the data file could be in CSV format, it could be in XML format, or it could be in JSON format. So these are the classic use cases with external vendors, right? So say, for example, Bloomberg, when they give Exchange rates, well, most probably they would do it in a JSON format. Or another data source might give a CSV or XML file. XML and JSON are anyways not FPDA. CSV also, don't think that every CSV is in FPDA format, guys. It could be a CSV file, but it might not be in FPDA format. So yes, we're not getting property file in scenario 3 and 4, so we generate one. Ignore that. Don't focus on property file. Now, what about the data file? So we would get a file in non-FPDA format, and I cannot send this non-FPDA data file in the same format to ERP cloud. Whatever the CSV file that I'm receiving, or whatever non-FPDA file that I'm receiving, I cannot send the same file to ERP cloud. Not possible, because it would throw an error. So let's see what sort of a file we get from a data source. Let's take an example. Okay, so assume that Bloomberg is going to give us this file. Okay, assume that Bloomberg is going to give us exchange rates in this particular CSV file format, which is not in FPDA format. And what are the fields that we have? You have from and to currency, from and to date, exchange rate, and inverse rate. Plain and simple, isn't it, guys? So we just have the required information here: from and to currency, from and to date, exchange rate, and inverse rate. Now we get this file from data source, and this file we need to convert it into this FPDA format. This non-FPDA file, we need to convert it into this FPDA format. Okay. Now, when we, so from this non-FPDA format, we need to generate this FPDA file. And if you compare these two, from and to currency, from and to date, so the first 4 fields that you see here are exactly same as in here. And the 5th field that you have in here is exchange rates directly. But the 5th field that we need to include in the file that we send to ERP cloud is exchange rate type. Which is corporate, right? So, but as a 5th field, we directly get the exchange rate and inverse rate. So we have exchange rate and inverse rate as well in FPDA format. So the change that we need is in position number 5. In position number 5, we need to have an exchange rate type. So I cannot use this file. As is, because if I send this file to ERP cloud, what would happen? ERP cloud will treat 74.71 as an exchange rate, and you get an error message. It will treat it as exchange rate type, and you get an error message saying that 74.71 is an invalid exchange rate. Okay. So what do we need to do? This is a file we're getting, and this is a file I need to send to ERP cloud. So how do we do it? Since we are not getting the file in required format, so in this operation, so if you see these steps, whatever we did in our main service, the first 3 operations would remain same, and last 3 operations would remain same. Okay, first 3 and last 3. But in between these first 3 and last 3, we just need to plug in 2 more actions there. So we're going to read that non-FPDA data file that we are receiving from data source, and we need to use that to generate a CSV file in FPDA format. Okay, so we need to read the FPDA file. We need to read FPDA's, we need to use a stage file action, read the entire file. And we also need to write the CSV file in FPDA format. With that content, we need to write an FPDA file. Since we're not getting the file in required format, we would read that file, use that content to generate the file in required format. So let's go ahead and do that operation here. So I'm going to clone this. Now, what do we do here in S3? So apart from this, after you download the file, there are 2 steps that I need to plug in here. So I need to use a stage file option. And when we download the file, first of all, we don't download it to exchange rates directly. Instead, I'm going to download it to a temporary location. I'm not downloading it to exchange rates. I'm downloading it to a temp location because this is a file which is in non-FPDA format, right? And I want to read that file content. So if you use a stage file action, if you use stage file, we can say read non-FPDA data file. So yeah, read non-FPDA data file. And when you want to read a file, remember the file is already downloaded to a temporary location, guys. We want to read that file content now. So when you do a read operation, there are two options available here, read operations, read entire file and read file and segments. So when you say read entire file, so as long as the file that we receive from data source is going to be less than or equal to 50 MB in size, read entire file would work. But the moment file size exceeds more than 50 MB in size, then you need to read the file in segments. Okay. So when you have to read the file size is less than or equal to 50 MB, read entire file or read file in segments. We'll do a read entire file operation first. So there are two ways I can mention which file needs to be read. I can mention what file and from what directory. So I can do this. I can mention this as a file name here. And in the directory path, I can say /temp so that OIC will go to the temp directory, pick up this CSV file. But instead of mapping the file name and the directory path, because we might commit mistakes if you use them. So instead of that, instead of the file reference, what do? We say configure file reference as yes. And when we download a file, we get a file reference here. And that file reference is what we are going to assign here. So whatever file that you have downloaded here, right? So that exact same file, you're going to load that. Yeah, this exact same file reference we added in here. Okay, so what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to download the whatever file that we have read from SFTP, right? Or downloaded from SFTP, we're trying to read that entire file. And we need to upload that CSV file. So this CSV file, since we are trying to do a read file operation, it needs to understand, or we need to let OIC know what is the sample file format. So let me go ahead and upload that a CSV file in non-FPDA format. I'm uploading that non-FPDA CSV file. Now, one important point, guys, the only thing that would change is, so sometimes a data source might say, Prasad, I can give you only XML file or JSON file or CSV file. So also the file, when the file is in non-FPDA format, the extension doesn't really matter, XML or CSV or JSON. So what would change in the entire integration with this file extension, guys, if Bloomberg says they will give you a JSON file, instead of selecting CSV here, you would just select JSON file and you would upload that JSON document sample file in the next one. If they say XML, you select XML. So the only thing that changes with the file extension, the entire integration build is the sample file that you're uploading here. So you say sample CSV file. And when you upload the sample non-FPDA file, you need to give it a name. GL daily rate non-FPDI. And this is a plural label, GL daily rate non-FPDI, GL daily rates non-FPDI, singular and plural label. And yes, the file that we have uploaded, right? By default, what does OIC do? OIC would consider that the first row is a column header. But is this the case here, guys? We don't have a column header, right? It's directly the data rows that we're getting here. So even the first row is a data row, so I need to uncheck it. And yes, it is a comma separated file. And you have auto-generated column names like C1, C2, C3 until C6. So if we can leave them as auto-generated column names, but you might get confused when you look at the mappings. When you do the mappings, you might not know what is C5, whether it is a to date or exchange rate. So that's why it's better to give a meaningful name. So I'm going to say from currency to currency, from date to date, inverse rate. Okay, I've just uploaded I've given a column headings and click on finish. What are we trying to do, guys? Whatever is a non-FPDA file that we have downloaded from SFTP to the file staging area, we're reading that file here. Now with that file content, I want to write a FPDA file. So I'm going to use stage file action again. Write FPDA data file. And I'm going to do a write file operation. And I want to generate a file with this particular format. And where do you want the file to be placed, guys? I want the file to be placed in /exchange rates directory, because to this particular location in the next node, we are adding a property file. And again, the same story. When I'm trying to write a file, it asks me to upload a sample file. Remember, when we are generating an FPDA file, it should always be a CSV file. And GL daily rate FPDI, singular and a plural label. And again, we don't have a column header in here. And in this CSV file, in the FPDA format, what do we have, guys? We have how many columns? Not 6 columns. We have 7 columns. This is exchange rate type, not exchange rate. This is the difference. So the 5th field is an additional field that we need in FPDA format. And we have to do the handshake. So when you do a stage file read action, guys, you would be able to see that entire file content here. Whatever is a non-FPDA file content we see, we would be able to see the file content here, repeating though. So you have from and to currency, from and to date, exchange rate, and invoice rate. And for exchange rate type, let's go ahead and receive that as a scheduled parameter instead of hard coding it. So that if it changes tomorrow, we can just update it in the scheduled parameter itself. We don't have to change the integration. So I'm just reading the non-FPDA data file and I'm using that content to generate the FPDA data file. Since we are not getting exchange rate from rate type from our data source, we are adding that as field number 5. And this file we are downloading it to the exchange rates location. To that location, we are writing a property file, zipping it, dropping it in SFTP, and sending it to ERP Cloud. So since we are getting a file in non-FPDA format, just 2 additional steps that we are doing is after we download the file, we are reading that file and we are generating the required file in FPDA format. Now, this is what you would do if the non-FPDA file that you receive from data source is in a CSV format. But what if you get a JSON file, guys? So what if Bloomberg says, Prasad, I'm going to give you exchange rates in a JSON format, not a CSV file. So let's say this is how the JSON format is going to look like. Bloomberg would give you exchange rates records in this particular file format, JSON format. So what do? So you just do the same thing, exact same thing that you have done in this integration. Nothing changes. There's only one small change. Let me show you what the change is going to be. Whatever non-FPDA file that you're reading, right? So you uploaded a sample file instead of CSV file, you just have to change this to JSON. And you need to upload that JSON file here. And what else we need to do? If you get into this mapper, remember so I changed the sample file here, right? All the mappings would not be valid here. So instead of deleting the existing mappings and recreating it, what I can do, guys, I can go ahead and delete the mapper, and I can add a fresh mapper, and I'll point it to this. Right, FPDA data file. This is a node that we have to link it with. Now we would loop the exchange rate records, sorry, the header row or a repeating row, and then you map the individual fields. Remember, these are basically the exchange rate, the JSON fields. Whatever fields that we have in JSON, like exchange rates from and to currency. So these are the fields that we are seeing here. And exchange rate type, you can map it here. So the only thing that changes with the file extension is when you are reading the non-FPDA file given by data source, you upload a sample file that would depend on only that bit would change. If Bloomberg says I'll give you a XML file or a JSON or CSV, you would just upload that sample file here and use that content to generate a FPDA file. Now we are reading the entire file in one go here, right? So what would happen if you get a file? So this read entire file operation. Let me just clone this. Clone S3. And I'm going to call it as S4. Yeah, so here we are trying to, when we read the non-FPDA data file, we are reading the entire file in one go. When would this operation work, guys? As long as the file size is going to be less than or equal to 50 MB in size, this is going to work, read entire file operation. But the moment you get a file which is 51 MB in size, this operation would fail. So what do we need to do when you have to read the file given by data source and use it to generate your FPDA data file? You need to ask the data source what could be the biggest file size they might give you. So if Bloomberg says it's going to be maximum 10 MB or 15 MB in size, then you can go ahead and use read entire file operation. But what if data source says, Prasad, we might get a file which is more than 50 MB in size as well. So in such case, what do we need to do, guys? We need to use a stage file action. And we say read non-FPDA data file. More than 50 MB in size. And you would read the file in segments, and you would map the file, pass in the file reference. So whatever file that we have downloaded here, we pass in that reference as input. And what is going to be the segment size? The file would be broken down into segments of 2000 records here. So you can change it from 200 to 2000. Okay, so if you have 10,000 records in a file, the file would be broken down into 5 segments because 2000 is mentioned here. And I need to map the file reference. So whatever is a file that we have downloaded earlier, I would map that file. And yes, the file would be broken down into 5 segments of 2000 records each if it is a 10,000 record file. And we can process the segments in sequence, or you can do a parallel processing. Sequential means the segments would be processed in sequence, and if you uncheck it, it would be processed in parallel. So if you say sequential processing or a parallel, you do whatever you want, and you go ahead and continue with it. But the remaining part would be exactly the same. So I need to upload a non-FPDA CSV file. and I need to give alias names. Inverse rate. So I'm just uploading that sample file, and it's going to be broken down into segments of 2000 records each. Now, since it is going to be broken down into segments of 2000 records each, there would be a loop that gets added. And with whatever, I'm going to delete this, read the file in one go. We don't need that. And I need to move these two operations into the loop here. So I'm going to cut it from here, and I'm going to paste it within the loop. So we would read the non-FPGA data file in segments, and with if it's a 10,000 record file, 5 segments, and with every segment we're going to generate an FPGA data file. And I'm also going to delete this mapper. I'm going to say write FPGA data file, adding a mapper again. And this time, what do we need to do? We need to map the read non-FPGA data file format here. Map the repeating row from currency to currency, from date to date, exchange rate, and inverse rate. And exchange rate type, we get it as an input parameter, schedule parameter. So what is it that we were trying to do this? We were trying to read the file in segments of 2000 records each. And we are within the loop, we are using those 2000 records at a time to generate a file in FPGA format. So if you have 10,000 records, how many segments will it be broken down into, guys? It would be broken down into 5 segments, right? And with every segment data, we're going to write the file. We're going to write the FPGA data file. We're going to generate FPGA data file here. Since we are doing this write file operation within a loop, there's one important checkbox that you need to tick, guys. When you write a file, there is one important option called append here. If I don't tick this, what would happen, guys? So if you have 5 segments, say 10,000 records, when the first segment is processed, this file would be created in this location. First 2000 records from non-FPGA file would be converted to FPGA format. When the second segment is processed, this write file operation would be attempted again. And if you don't tick append box, what would happen? This file would be overwritten. And what would happen? You would only have 2000 to 4000 records in that FPGA file. So basically, you would end up with only the last segment records in FPGA format. So to avoid that, we need to tick this append checkbox. That is really, really important. If you miss it, then you will have only the last segment records in the base. Okay, so this is a fourth scenario. Now, as I explain all of this, in short, what are we trying to do, guys? If you have to summarize it in one line. So if you don't get property file, we generate it. If you don't get file in required format, we are reading the file format. We are reading the file that we're getting from data source using a stage file, read action, or read entire file, or read file and segments, depending on the file size. And we are using that content to generate the FPGA file within the integration itself. So we are reading the non-FPGA data file, and with that content, we're generating FPGA data file. We're doing all of this within the integration layer itself. But it's not always going to be this simple, ways, because since the transformation we need to do in this integration is plain and simple, like inserting one additional field at position 5, like inserting one additional field at position 5, it's okay, it works. This one would work. But if we have to do any complex transformations, then you would have to definitely need to use a database layer. Sometimes you might get one file from a data source, and you might have to split the files into multiple files and send it to cloud. Maybe you're getting AP invoices file as one single file from data source. You need to split it into headers and line files. Because when you load AP invoices, it's two different CSV files that you need to pass, one for headers and one for lines. Or you might be getting a fixed length file from data source. Like, what is a classic example of fixed length files is? I'm not sure how many of you have worked on Logbox earlier. So this Logbox is basically, it's a file that you get from a bank, and in this file you would have the receipts information, AR receipts information. Like if I'm running a manufacturing firm and I sell the goods to customers and I receive payments in my bank account, I might have a bank account with Wells Fargo or Citibank, and I would ask all the customers to deposit payment in that particular bank account. And yes, AR invoices would have been created in ERP Cloud. And when I receive a bank payment in my Wells Fargo bank account, those payments need to be applied on these AR invoices that are created in ERP Cloud. And doing it manually is the last thing that you want, right? Because I might have 10,000 invoices. So that is where what banks would do was they would give you a logbox file where you have the receipts information, whatever customer is making the payment, how much payment are they making, and for against what invoices are they are making the payment. So every bank has its own format. So based on their format, they would give us a file, okay? And they would be giving us a fixed length file like this, like meaning you don't have any delimiters like comma or tab, you don't have any delimiters. So why was it so simple in the earlier cases? Because even though it is a JSON file or a CSV file, we have a delimiter. We can easily make out which field is what. But in the case of Logbox here, we don't have any delimiter here. So they are going to, and what Wells Fargo is going to do, they will throw a specification at you and they would ask you to go through it. And if you look at the specification, you might see it says, look at the first digit in the row. And if it is a 6, consider it as a receipt row. And if it is 4, consider it as an invoice row. Okay, so this is how it's going to work out. So when you get a fixed length file like this one, when you get fixed length files like this one, it would be very difficult to read that entire file content in the integration layer and use it to generate a PDF file. And that's exactly when we make use of our database layer. So in tomorrow's session, I'm going to show you how to plug in a database layer in between to do the complex transformations that you need in FPGA integrations. Any questions, guys, from anyone?
Prasad, so if we are going through this, suppose our file is more than 50 MB, and we are reading it in a segment. So just clicking by sequential or parallel, we can avoid that the same file is not getting read again and again.
The file will never get read again and again. So because what we do was within that file, so we are doing one file at a time. First of all, here. And here we are getting into the file and reading the segments there. So whether you do it sequence or parallel doesn't matter. The segment that is already read would not be read again. If there is no dependency in the field sequence or a record sequence, there's no compulsion for you that if there's no dependency between the first set of records and second set of records in a file, you can process them in any order. Like maybe exchange rates, you don't really need to have any dependency, right? So in such cases, you can do parallel processing, which means 10,000 record file will be broken down into 2,000 records, 5 segments, and those 5 segments will be processed in parallel. So what does the parallel processing mean? The second record in a stage file, in the data file, non-FPGA data file, might not be 5th row in a FPGA data file because it might be coming in from a second segment. So the record sequence would change, but if there's no dependency in the record sequence, that's completely fine. You can do a parallel processing. Okay.
My question was by clicking on this append button or append checkbox, we can avoid the duplicacy of the data, whether it is download or read, or is it?
Okay. Let's say that append checkbox is not ticked. Okay. And let's say you have 4,000 rows in a file. How many segments will be there? How many segments will it be broken down into? 2 segments. Okay, let's say the first segment is picked up 1 to 2000 records. What will happen here? That CSV file will be written to that GL daily rates location. Okay, done. Second segment is picked up now. It tries to write a file again, same file to the same directory. When it tries to create a file in that directory with the same name, if the file already exists with that name, if you don't tick that append checkbox, whatever 2000 records which were written in FPDA format would be overwritten. Again, a fresh file will be placed there. And in that file, 2000 to 4000 records will be placed in FPDA format. So if there is a third segment would overwrite the second one. So if you click on append checkbox, what would happen? The file content keeps getting appended to the file. So the append checkbox is something that you have to tick always. Remember it for sure. Okay, whether you do sequential processing or parallel processing, this has no impact on the append checkbox. These are two different things. Okay, since we are doing this in a loop, we need to use append. And whether we want to do the write file operation in sequence or in parallel, that's okay. Even if you do sequential or parallel, you just have to tick that checkbox. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Prasad, this 50 MB constraint is not on the ERP side, correct? It is on SFTP side. That's why we want to break file in chunks.
Yeah, not SFTP side. The file that can be processed in OIC layer. If you do a read file operation, it is 50 MB in size. So if it is a file, and that same 50 MB restriction also applies to FTP operation as well. Remember, in file transfer service, we were doing an FTP read file operation, right? So if you try to read a file, whether it is from a file staging area or whether it is from FTP, it doesn't really matter. You can only read a file which is 50 MB in size. But the moment it is more than 50 MB in size, you have to use, what do you need to do if you have to deal with big files? We need to do a download file operation from SFTP first, download the file to temporary staging area, and you need to read the file. And when you read that file that you have downloaded, you're going to read the file in segments. Okay. Yeah. So that you can work around that 50 MB restriction. Okay. Any other questions, guys, from anyone?
So where do we use FPDI? I know it's silly, but where do we use FPDI and where do we use file transfer?
File transfer is like, you don't need to load the data into any application. You just have to pick it up from one location, drop it at another one.
Okay.
It's only transferring the files. But in FPDA, we are basically processing it as well, loading it into cloud. Okay, so transferring and processing is a difference.
All right.